For the people that, didn't see on Twitter, the first thing that kind of went around was the schools now can pay NIL, meaning that it can come out of the actual school's budget. And Matt Rule had said before that, he wants to have as much of this come from the donors, boosters, fan, you know, led NIL and stuff like that than the school. This right here, it opens up a big window, though, for a lot of scrutiny and a lot of people really coming after the athletics department because the allocation of resources is going to be a big, big point of contention and where the money goes and how much is going to the athletic department versus the academical side of things. And so they said council changes, transfer rules permit immediate eligibility for transfers who are academically standing at previous schools met progress towards a degree. So they do the immediate transfer rule. That one dropped. And then also the one where schools can pay NIL. And the one where schools can pay NIL kind of went under the radar because it dropped at the same exact time. And people were more worried about the portal stuff. Both are big. And they say for transparency, here's end quote from the article. The data, which will be de-identified and aggregated for trend reporting and some level of transparency, will include contact information for involved parties, service providers, terms of arrangement. Essentially, so they'll have compensation payment structure there that will be available for them, and applicable compensation between student athletes and service providers. Prospective student athletes will be required to disclose the same information pre-enrollment NIL activity within 30 days of enrollment to accept school assistance in NIL activities or become a student athlete. And so, basically we're inching our way into contracts. That's about where we are. That's where recruiting is officially going to turn into free agency. We're working our way towards contracts and clauses and all that. And the first step in that was having the schools be able to pay NIL and structure these things. So that's going to be very, very interesting to see play out over time. And I don't think that's getting enough attention, at least yet. It dropped like in 45 minutes before the show.
Yeah. So what I think is going to be one of the main considerations that will possibly change the sport or the power structure of the sport is how this revenue and these salaries are going to be handled in this way. Is there going to be a revenue sharing plan by college football? So is this new league, whether that's just the Big Ten and the SEC or whomever else they bring on, and that's 32, 48, whatever the number, we saw the number at 70 with 80 going to that number because of group of 5 entries, whether they're going to, and if that's the case, then they're going to have to share money because the value of probably out of those 80, the value of 40 of them isn't enough to compensate and justify the TV contracts.
Nope.
So regardless of what the number is, let's say that we finish with 48 teams. And those are all the teams that have been deemed worthy of adding to the TV contract that bring value, and everybody else go do whatever you want, go play group of 5 football, and we'll schedule you 1 or 2 games in September.
Right.
But otherwise, we're doing our own thing because we're here to make money. Right. All right. Similar to what we talked about a few weeks ago with, we'll take, for example, the Big Ten contract.
Yep.
Where I think the revenue is something right around $1 billion a year.
Stuff like that.
NBC, CBS, and Fox.
Yep.
If the same amount of money or the same budget or cap is given to each particular team, depending on where that money comes from, is it fair that we'll use Ohio State as an example versus Indiana, that they're going to be using the same amount of money, even though Ohio State draws 10 times the viewership,
Right.
and they bring in the money. We
Yep.
know who brings in the money.
Correct.
Ohio State and Michigan bring in the most money, and then it's Penn State, and then it's Nebraska and Wisconsin and so forth. If
Yep.
Nebraska ever starts winning to the level that Ohio State's winning, they'll probably be right up there as well.
Right.
Uh, so it's part of it's never going to change.
Correct.
Part of it will change somewhat depending on who's winning and USC, et cetera. We can all, come up with the tiers pretty easily.
Yep.
Or do they do something? You brought up Major League Baseball a few minutes ago. Well, Major League Baseball obviously has a huge issue and always has with
Salary
the
cap.
New York Yankees,
Dodgers.
just
Padres.
by the sheer luck of being located in New York City. Even if they do nothing right, just make tons of money through their Yes Network and the local radio rights and everything, just can be jacked up through the roof versus what Kansas City can draw, because there's just not enough people there
The
to justify.
Dodgers, just to show you, the
Yeah,
Dodgers are paying 3 players $3 billion. 3 players combined $1 billion over the course of their contract.
yeah.
3.
And so that's always been an issue. Well, Major League Baseball came up with a system in which they devised a luxury tax at some point to penalize teams that went over a certain threshold, and they gave that, but it doesn't in any way come close to compensating it or evening it out. But it's an attempt to say, okay, basically, we're going to build a system where you're going to earn your money on your own merit, but we're going to also honor the fact that everybody's an equal partner in the league. So there's going to be some money that's going to be shifted. The NFL has the perfect scenario.
Yeah.
The NFL, we can bring up just about anything involving money, marketing, whatever with the NFL, and they pretty much have not made a mistake in the 60 plus years that they've taken over American sports. And this is one that they kind of lucked into, because football's one time a week and it's not baseball where you're playing in local markets, and therefore the local market dictates how much money you make. In the NFL, you play once a week. All the games are on national television, and the networks decide who gets to see what and so forth, but it's all split. And so you can be in Green Bay, Wisconsin, in a town of 50,000 people, and you can compete with the New York Giants because you're splitting the national TV contract. And therefore, it's all fair across the board. And there's slight variances in merchandise sales and ticket sales, but it's basically everybody's making the same amount of money. And that's why you see whoever, Cincinnati can go to the Super Bowl, anybody can go to the Super Bowl, because the NFL evenly distributes money.
Yep. And that's the biggest thing is I think with the NCAA right now, they're in such a weird situation with not only the fact that there's so much scrutiny over every move they make in terms of NIL and stuff like that, but at the same time, they're also in this battle against conferences as well. So the NCAA has to really measure their approach based on, trying to mitigate backlash and damage towards them. So I think in some way they're going to find a way to figure that out. And revenue distribution, I think, was what Matt Rule was talking about. Revenue sharing is what Matt Rule was talking about before, that Trev Alberts was working on. This is going to be one of those things where he mentioned your athletic departments have to be ahead of the game when it comes to this stuff for you to survive. And I think that's the biggest thing, is those schools have to push for the equality there, and the equality of being able to compete even with this, in place. And I think, to your point, a lot of the money, most of the money comes from college football. That's not, that's for us that want to realize that, admit that. I think some of these educators are probably going to not take that into account and talk about the allocation of funds between where it goes in terms of the school, which department, and stuff like that. So, but for the most part, if they break down the numbers, they'd see that. I think it's going to be one of those things that comes from it. But I do think that the NCAA, hopefully, with the pressure around them right now is going to take a more measured approach than they usually do. Um, and for somebody talking about Dion bringing Sap in to coach the offensive line, that's yet another example of Dion being about names and not about substance. So I digress. But yeah, yeah, that's it's opened up a big revolving door of more questions. Just like we get some answered, and then here we go back around the ringer here with the transfer, acceptability of immediate transfers and the NIL stuff coming at this dropping at the same time. They probably did that to make sure you're distracted from one of them.
Just to add briefly to your Warren Sapp comment, this is no knock on Warren Sapp, who's an all-time great player and a Hall of Famer. And this is not a knock against his coaching ability because I don't know what his coaching ability is, but it's more likely that he's not going to work as hard, that he's not going to study as much film because of who he is. And he's just not been the guy that was a high school football coach that got an SGA job at a group of five school that's put in 15 years, and now he's finally arrived at a place like Nebraska or Colorado where he can be an assistant coach and make good money. And he's been a grinder for 15 years. Now, I'm not saying maybe he will do that, but it's far less likely.
Yes. And it just, he could have brought in a guy with experience, could have brought in a guy with accolades with a lesser name, but is what it is. Is what it is.
The only other part that I need to hit on with what we're talking about with the NCAA is the basic point that you brought up at the forefront of all this is the NIL portion of it with the school. So the school's able to organize the NIL, work with the athlete and the NIL, and so forth and so on. And that is the big differentiator, even if the Nebraskas and Ohio States and Penn States, et cetera, are sharing the money evenly with the Indianas and Illinois, that there is still going to be an inordinate amount of support from the boosters and the NIL collectives that those type of schools can receive versus
Others.
the lesser schools.
Yeah. And that's yeah, it's just to do whatever they can that's in their control to level the playing field, essentially. But some of those things are just always out of their control. And if donors want to donate money, you can't regulate that.
No, and,
So,
and we shouldn't.
yep.
You should keep track of it and understand what's going on, and there should be some type of reporting process. But uh, so many college football fans, and maybe you've been hit with the same thing, have been the same people, it seems, that were saying these athletes are getting ripped off.
Yep. Oh yeah.
It's $1 billion industry, and they make nothing. They just get a scholarship. Are now jealous and upset because athletes are making money.
Yep. It's crazy because those people were like, "Oh, scholarship's enough." Do you know how hard it is to be a collegiate student athlete? Always be on the road, traveling, trying to stay up with your schoolwork, maintaining a certain GPA, practices. Like it's difficult. Like
It's a
people,
full-time job, plus they're going to school.
most people couldn't handle it, and everybody who's saying scholarships enough have not even probably stepped foot on a field to know what it's like to even go through two-a-days in summer. So,
Absolutely. I am somewhere in the middle on that, in that I am one that values the scholarship and says that that is part of a very valuable payment to the
yes,
player,
exactly, but not
but
all.
that's that's not everything. And if it's a $1 billion industry and the players are getting nothing but a
Give what they earn.
scholarship,
They
that's
have a
not
right.
right.
They have a right just like anybody else. We're in a society of capitalism. They should be able to put in work and make money off of the work they put in and off of the talent that they have. That is their value, you know.
And I also believe that it should continue to be a part of the collegiate experience for the gymnastics person or whomever that is extremely talented and so forth, but their sport does not generate money. It gets subsidized, it gets funded, but Do they earn money? No, they get a scholarship because their sport does not generate money.
Right. And I think like Fong Wei, to your argument and some of the conversation going on here, is it a little bit out of control with the money flying around? Yeah. It's getting a little like the more and more money's being thrown around, the numbers get bigger and bigger. So, but that's two different arguments. One, we're saying the players should get compensated. We're not saying that all the compensation is exactly what it should be, or there shouldn't be little changes made. But the fact of the matter is they deserve to be paid, quite simply.
Yeah, they are contributing to again, hundreds of millions, billion-dollar industry per year. And so there should be some compensation. And again, trying to put a limit on, I understand putting a limit on, just like the NFL. The NFL has a salary cap that's tied directly to how much the league's worth and what the revenue is. And if the
Yep.
revenue would ever go down, it's within the
Inversely. Yep.
CBA that the player's salary cap would go down, but it keeps going up. Therefore, it's the cap's adjusted. They run a business and they know how to run the business, so they know that I'm just throwing out a number. 72% of their revenue needs to go to player salary, and when they make an extra $80 million more than they made last football season, the salary cap goes up a 72% of that,
Correct.
and they run a business. Um, but yes, you can't. The only issue I have with the NIL. So if Joe Blow's Chevrolet dealer in Lincoln wants to give Dylan Raiola $1 million, I have no issue with that. That's between those two parties. I have an issue with uh, that type of money going to a player, and then because it's not tied to his play, that he can take off with that money and not play for that school.
Yes. Yeah. And that's where the questions come in, is just how is it going to be done? Is it a year by year basis? Are they able to do, it's probably going to have to be year after year. And it's going to be one of those things where since there probably is going to be a written contract that, any moving away from the school is a violation of that. And, the school's out of it or something like that. But that remains to be seen. Like, is that kind of what you're alluding to?
Yeah.
With yeah.
Obviously, these NIL, unless it's Nike, let's say they're an example where they just know that Dylan Raiola is a phenom,
Yes.
and wherever he plays, we just want to be attached to Dylan Raiola,
Right.
just his brand.
Yep.
Therefore, that's what it is. But the Chevrolet dealer in Lincoln is attaching itself to Dylan Raiola
Yes.
because of him playing for Nebraska. Therefore,
Oh, right.
that
Yeah.
should be honored.
Exactly. No, yeah, that makes sense. No, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Um, yeah, I just, man, as soon as this, like I said, something gets figured out, something changes, and it opens up a whole different myriad of questions and upcoming changes. And it's just like, at least football's coming up. So now we can, here pretty soon, we can just focus on football. I mean, football's here, but when it's going to be here regularly, we can focus on that. I'll be so happy. But we got to talk about this stuff while it's here because it's important and it's the future of the sport.
People
So,
get caught up in how difficult they think the job is and how much it's worth because of how difficult it is. And I totally get that. I understand that if a guy's outside digging a ditch and working his tail off and breaking his back, then it'd be nice if he could make quite a bit of money to do that because that's really hard work.
as we call
But unfortunately, just about any guy that's 25 years old can sling a shovel and dig a ditch. Therefore, it's not worth that much.
Yep.
People were making comments, and I'm sure you saw it on social media about Caitlin Clark's WNBA contract
Yeah.
being roughly between $75,000 and $90,000 salary per year, and saying, she's underpaid.
Yep.
Well, first of all, she's going to make a ton of money in endorsements.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's not the money she's making. But let's just stick to the salary. Actually, these WNBA players, as I see it, are overpaid, not because they're not good basketball players and shouldn't be paid and they're not working hard. People get that totally wrong. but the WNBA is in the red. It's
Yes,
not in the black. It's running a deficit and it's propped up by the NBA.
by a
Therefore, it's
lot.
not worth anything. Therefore, it's a charity of the NBA at this point. Now, Caitlin Clark and the popularity of women's college basketball may change that.
Yes. And it's Matt, I'm sorry, Adam Silver came out 2018, said the WNBA is losing $10 million per year. So to your point about it being propped up by the NBA, yes. And also, all of these sports had to build. It's not like all of a sudden they had this salary cap and it just stuck there. They raised it up to $300 million contracts and it just stayed there. They built that. Even the NFL still building up, players getting more and more. WNBA just wants to be shot to the top, immediately when there's just not, they're going to go under. If you pay them NBA contracts, they won't last past the first game of the season.
There is a great short with who's the guy that used to be on ESPN, Will Kane. I don't
Oh
know if
yeah.
you know who I'm
I
talking
like
about.
him. Yeah, I like Will Kane. He's
Will,
fiery, but
um, there was a I hope this doesn't offend anyone, but we're just talking, and believe me, if the inverse was true, I'd be saying the same exact thing.
yep,
But there was upheaval over, this was the last cycle of World Cup soccer,
yep,
that the men were being paid, I don't know what the amount, but let's say it was twice as much as the women. And there was all this, okay, this is not fair. The men and the women should be paid the same. And this isn't fair. And his point was, you're right, it's not fair. The men are only paid twice as much as the women. And then he rolled off the revenue generated by the men's World Cup versus the women's World Cup. And it's like 10 to 1 or
yep.
20 to 1. He said, you're right. It's not fair. It should be
More for the men.
more than that.
Yep. And it's like people want to base the money off of the performance of the specific team or it's no different than, like, let's say, you want to they want to pay them on skills. They want to pay them on everything else but revenue. And it's always got to come down to revenue. Nebraska's not paying their players based on success of the program. They're paying their players based on revenue. And they've earned that revenue just like the men's sport has earned that revenue. They've grown it, and they've put the work into doing it. And so it's a handout versus building. And they should take this right now as a win and say, we've built the game year over year, the most we've ever probably built it. And so that's what they should be happy about, that, not complaining about how they're not the NBA.
Justin, maybe tomorrow we could change this YouTube channel to a I don't know, where
WNBA?
we do like stupid pranks or something. And if we did that well enough, we'd probably within a year have like 3 million subs and
Oh yeah.
maybe getting like 10 million views per video, and we'd be making a ton of money. Now, is that valuable? Is there value in that? Well, it depends how you based on the supply and demand. Yes, there is. If people want to see it, it makes money, but is it valuable? No. But in our society, based on supply and demand, yes, it is.
Exactly. Yeah, it'd be a lot easier. Like, most of my tweets that pop off are me talking about boxing or influencer boxing or something like that. Like, I could go on YouTube and yell about that and make money, but that's not of value to me. And before we get out of here, TMZ, you need to relax, buddy. I was in the military. Just calm down, dude. It was a example of something that is uh hard work, but not quite as difficult as what they go through the collegiate level. So yeah, calm down there, big guy. I'll leave that at that. But and
Absolutely.
to Scott's question that I pulled up on the screen earlier, drop that in the comments of the live after it posts, and I'll get to that.
Good stuff.
So it's a fun conversation though. I like
Yeah,
it.
it is. And there's a lot. Whoever grabs control of this sport, and we don't know exactly who that's going to be, but I believe the SEC and the Big Ten are going to be involved uh, to some large degree.
Yeah.
That they're going to have to sift through all of this and figure out the best way to do it.
On top of all the movement and everything else that's already going on or potentially about to come down the hatch with other teams. So
Yes.
they got their hands full. Everybody does right now.
And the Big Ten has that much power, even though, Justin, half of those teams could lose to Colorado State.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Fongway, sorry, bro. We love you, though. Just remember that.